Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back. It is exactly 8:47, and we will be talking with Ashraf Patel, Senior Research Associate at the Institute for Global Dialogue. He'll be with us at least for the next 10 minutes because we will be taking the news on the top of the hour. And of course, we're going to be focusing on AGOA and should this have happened? And should South Africa actually have hosted AGOA, given what's going down in Palestine? Ashraf Patel, Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the program.
Walaikum salam, Julie and listeners. Hope you're well.
With your duas always, and always a pleasure talking with you. Let's start. I know there were lots of noises, lots of protest, or talks about protest action outside of where the AGOA Forum 2023 was going to be happening. But we also know that in a globally competitive post-COVID world, fractured by geopolitics and multiple wars, the global South and Africa face increased interest from global powers. We face ideological storms and are caught up in a range of conceptualizations in industrial relations, theories ranging from uneven development, democratic peace theories, resource curse theses, and of course, real politic. Where does that answer the question of should AGOA have been hosted by South Africa in this time when all of those atrocities are playing out on the Palestinian people? Welcome. Always a pleasure to talk to you. And of course, you're going to respond to that very lengthy statement.
Yes, Julie. The article focuses on what is called realpolitik, meaning that politics of the powerful, such as the US, Europe, and other powers, they can bring to bear considerable pressure on smaller players like South Africa, etc., in the global geopolitical contestation. So just as a backdrop, just last week, U.S. Congress approved $14.5 billion emergency aid package to Israel. So that's an interesting backdrop. Yet the AGOA, one of its key platforms supposedly is human rights and trade. So if you connect the dots, you can see a massive disconnect on anything but human rights.
Should this have then gone ahead if they're talking about human rights issues and having raised them at AGOA? I kind of wondered, would these issues be raised? And then let's also bring BRICS into the picture here. Where and how does BRICS fit in regarding this forum that we had with AGOA? And of course, geopolitics all around the world, very especially regarding the situation in the Middle East. And what is playing out now in the Middle East, in Palestine particularly, Ashraf, also has put the whole or taken the spotlight off the Ukrainian situation, has it not?
Yes, it's really a divided and fractured world order. And different kind of middle powers are straddling both the Western Bloc and the Eastern Bloc. Nations like South Africa and Brazil, Indonesia, Mexico, and others are sort of caught in these headwinds. And so, yes, South Africa is a member of BRICS, full partner, benefits from trade, investment, and development with its BRICS partners. Equally, it participates with the European Union as well as the US through AGOA. Now, playing that different forums is a delicate balancing act, as the president and his ministers have to do, and it's immense diplomatic capital that they have to invest in these multitude of forums. And so, yes, when there is a conflict or war and a genocide in Palestine, it does bring to bear our very strong solidarity policies and posture. So it is definitely challenging. I can just imagine the kind of discussions that's taking place. But at the end of the day, the article goes into also the development content of what actually AGOA is. And I've outlined 5 areas of concern around AGOA.
Okay, we're going to look at those 5 areas. I also want to ask, all right, let me ask this very simplistically, and you can give me a simple answer, and then we'll go to the 5 issues that you have outlined. Should AGOA have happened, how important is it for South Africa to have been a part of this forum, given what's playing out in Palestine?
Look, AGOA is 25 years old. It's a long-standing kind of partnership. It has positives and it has negatives, like a lot of trade agreements. Um, it has forums every 3 or 4 years. It's trying to kind of compete with the Chinese Forum for Africa Development that takes place every 3 years. And next year is the China-Africa FOCAD Summit. So it does compete directly with China especially and BRICS to some extent. So it would happen anyway, whether be it in South Africa or Mozambique or Ghana, etc. The challenge is there's a huge push. Remember, there was a fallout between South Africa and the U.S. around our supposed support for Russia or our voting patterns at the UN. And then the whole Lady R saga. That has put a dampener on relations. And obviously the independent panel found out that there was no kind of export of arms. So I think it's also a kind of public relations push from the U.S. side to host it in South Africa to mend those relations. So there's multiple objectives when we have such forums between a large power like the U.S. and a middle kind of income power such as South Africa. So there's always going to be a number of objectives when hosting such a forum.
Okay, Ashraf, we've got about 6 minutes to news time, so let me try and rush through this without missing any important points. We look at issues around human rights. We look at also the issue of the 500 billion rand IMF loan stimulus package to South Africa in 2020 during the COVID pandemic. Um, if we had not supported AGOA, if we had pulled out of it, how does that impact on that loan? And but that talks also directly to issues around human rights, contradictory stances on human rights issues, not only in Palestine, but I think in Africa as a continent.
Yes, definitely. So human rights is a tool in diplomacy, is well deployed by the West, especially the U.S. So Ethiopia was suspended from AGOA for 2 years because of the conflict with Tigray. Yet a country like Swaziland, which has one of the most draconian, oppressive dictatorships, because it's a U.S. ally, its access to AGOA has increased. So that sends out different signals to Africa on a kind of human rights framework. Yes, there should be a human rights framework in trade, but then it's important to apply it uniformly. So it doesn't send different messages to Africa as a whole and different leaders. And I think that is the problem with the U.S. approach, that human rights is used in an arbitrary fashion and not as a principle. And I think that's where the U.S. has lots of deficits in its IR policy towards Africa and the developing South.
The issue around the IMF loan to South Africa, the stimulus package, would that have been impacted in any way at all? Or is this really talks at a very high diplomatic level, which would actually perhaps help or assist um, countries in Africa where resources are so sorely needed? And are we in that situation as well, where we would be so very heavily reliant on Western countries and Western loans?
Yes, definitely. Historically, IMF bailout packages have had political objectives from the 1960s, and the IMF bailout of South Africa has been a huge dent on our fiscus. It has provided the fiscal stimulus during the COVID pandemic years, but it has left us in a huge debt. Therefore, Minister of Finance Godongwana announced that our largest payment on our budget at 28% is interest on loans, which includes the IMF bailouts. And
Mm.
therefore, it shows you the dependency that's created. And of those loans, the conditions were that we procure vaccines from multinational corporations like Pfizer, etc. And therefore, that created another dependency in the health system where those vaccines were not effective and 35% of them had to be disposed of. So there's huge work, and that needs to be a focus as well. Otherwise, you cannot say you want good governance on the one hand, which is a condition, and on the other hand, the loans can be spent on multinational corporations that have no accountability. And this is another contradiction of trade with large powers.
Let's wrap up by talking. Let me just look at um, step number 4 in this article that you've written, and that has to it deals with copyright amendment, the Copyright Amendment Bill. And then when you go on to number 5, it speaks to exploitation. Can you unpack those 2 points for us, please?
Yes, Julie. Another major profit center of U.S. trade is the copyright and entertainment industry. Now, over the last several years, the U.S. Trade Office and multinationals pushed South African Parliament to adopt a certain version of the copyright bill, which gives their corporations control over the content of local producers, leaving a lot of our local artists and musicians impoverished. And that was a huge controversy and is still controversial. So they pushed for it and they cited it as an investment risk. And today we had to sell out. Our own parliament sold out or is selling out our local artists because their copyrights are not protected. Netflix wins, Google wins, Disney wins. But the local artist in South Africa loses their copyright. They have no control over it. That's a major issue as well. And then finally, of course, another element is workers' rights. In all these agreements, AGOA and others, you find special economic zones, export processing zones. And these are zones where you get investment from large corporations across the world. And they then can relax labor laws, health and safety regulations. So then one asks, is it really about human rights and development, or is it another form of extraction and labor and environmental exploitation? And I think when we unpack all these subsets of AGOA and other agreements, we find that in net terms, Africa loses out again in big ways. And this is the sad part of global trade in the world today.
So, what's the point then? My final question to you, Ashraf. What's the point then for Africa to have, or South Africa for that matter, having invested so heavily in this forum when we're really not going to get much out of it? In fact, I think at the end of the day, we're going to be, from what you're telling me, the losers. It's going to cost us, it's costing us to be part of AGOA.
Yes, look, there are some benefits. I mean, let's not be too critical. There are export opportunities for small and medium enterprises, so that's good. It creates jobs. But in net terms, when you look at the big picture and those elements that has been outlined, it doesn't have that industrial development potential that is so important, where the BRICS Forum actually comes in with a big push on industrial development, industrialization. So there are pros and cons of each model, But I think in the current situation where U.S. budgets are going into wars, I don't see
Ah.
any hope for Africa to gain. In fact, U.S. needs more resources, so they'll be more extractive in their foreign direct investment because they need to fund these large wars that's currently taking place. So it's very sobering at this point in time.
Absolutely. Ashraf, always a pleasure talking with you. We will catch up again sometime soon. You go well, and salamu alaikum to you.
Wa alaikum salam. Shukra.
Rejuvenating media day by day.